UX prototyping is often something where we think of, let's make something, a mock-up, let's make some screens. But it's really about what's in between the screens, and this is what microinteractions is about. Especially when we talk about Internet of Things devices, like new types of auditory interfaces where we can talk to them, or as you can see in this Wall Street Journal article here, on thinking that there's no such thing as an iPhone in 10 years. Everything is going to be like voice, it's going to be like AI, it's going to be sensor networks which will communicate. How do we prototype something like this? We still want to make it very lean, right? We don't want to make it complex, so a simple prototype is what we want. And then we want to validate this with users. So here it's really about devil is in the details. And this means that when we make a prototype, we try and define very clearly what goes on in between the screens. This can be illustrated like in this HealthKit app here. You could say HealthKit is all by itself, or sort of an Internet of Things thing where you combine apps with sensors and stuff. But you want to make out how do the screens connect, because when you have all these things happening in between the screens, then you need to figure that out. This is not something you do when you just sort of start coding. Quite on the contrary, you can do this before you code, and then everything is going to be clear. For example, in this case here, we talk about 5 things in microinteractions. We talk about triggers. This could be like the user steps up on a scale we want to figure out. And if his weight has increased, this is rule, then something should happen. And in this case, there's actually a branch, if this, then that. Or you do something else and it's okay. And we continue in the same branch, and this would then be, the feedback would be next screen. But it's quite important that we think about everything here. So let's say we start with sending out an alert to the user saying, step up on the scale. And the user doesn't do this. How long should it then loop before it figures out, okay, I should send another alert, or, I should trigger video recording or something. All this goes into the nurse version of this. And she has a completely different approach. She wants to figure out, based on the weight data, the blood pressure, and so on, can she up-titrate the patient? Can she increase the dosage of medicine? Because this would, make the treatment so much faster and improve life for the user. So that's what all the triggers, rules, feedback, branches, loops are about here. Applying like a rule-based approach to, if this, then should I talk to the patient? Should I just up-titrate or whatever? So this also sounds like, if this, then that. And surprise, surprise, this is also the name of a Internet of Things prototyping environment where you can do this. So, for example, a trigger could be that you talk to Alexa. So that's one of the smart speakers, and it talks to the light bulb, and it does something which is then based on a rule. And the feedback is the light bulb does whatever you define it to do. But you could say there's probably a loop to start with, right? Because Alexa doesn't just sort of trigger, it listens all the time until you say, Alexa, and then it will do something. Doesn't need to be BMWs or light bulbs or anything. It could be services like YouTube and Spotify. So here, your trigger is you like something. Then the rule is, okay, go in and try and find this and add it to Spotify. But if we talk about new types of auditory interfaces, then we could do this prototyping based on the Oticon Open device, which is IFTTT enabled, and turn it around a little. So instead of saying, okay, if you do this, it should trigger a light bulb or a car or whatever, you could say, no, it should generate data. We should have something where it's possible for us now to apply machine learning or whatever we want to figure out what is the user intents and how should we sort of adapt the device to what the user wants here. So that could be based on, let's say, the user changing program and volume, and we would be in doubt, what does this mean? But it could be combined with also location. So let's say you go into something which is a work environment, it could be a restaurant, and then you have some more clues. And then you say, okay, that would, as a feedback here, trigger that you store data in Google Sheets. So you don't need to have a database. You just add another row. So you will have the program, the volume, and you will also have the location. So you can apply some data analytics afterwards to figure out, what does this mean? And this thing with coupling voice, because maybe you could talk to your open device, and machine learning is something you can see here. This is a service which actually does image recognition. So whenever I take an image, I have kind of chained two IFTTT applets here. The first one is if I add a new photo, so that means it will then talk to our iOS photos, and it says, yes, something was added. And then the other one will go in and define, okay, then classify this image. So this means that even very complex stuff like image recognition, indoor classification can be done. So in this case here, I've said, if this is a bar, thinking that, okay, if we identify, maybe the user said, this doesn't work, and we say, okay, take a photo. And the user says, and then it comes out as a bar, and we think, that's probably a noisy place. Actually, no, it was a nice Italian restaurant in Vancouver, but however, this is in progress. And here you can then see it has a certain confidence that this is correct. It is whatever indoor environment, and if that is so, it will add yet another row to the Google Sheets. And this all based on webhooks, of course, that you can also use IFTTT to set up these communications. So in between the screens here, we are having HTTP requests, which would go to a specific service. And you have your own, let's say, URL here, which identifies that you are the user. So you don't need a server or someplace else. You just send this request to IFTTT, which will then treat that and say, okay, should we forward this? And in this case here, it's like, okay, if the sound classification here maybe was like high, whatever that means, then the webhook should probably then start to talk to the Oticon Open app and say, do something about it, change something.